Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the 5.9 Demo Friday. My name is Vince Arnasia, and I'm the head of product management at 5.9. And joining me today is Rob Connolly. Rob is one of our senior systems engineers who works extensively with our customers and is also involved with the product management process. What we want to do today is we want to cover a specific topic within the 5.9 platform, which is focused around administration. We're seeing quite a trend as it relates to managed service providers, larger enterprises looking for this kind of capability, and we felt it was worth a focus around Demo Friday. Before we do that, we wanted to give you an overview of 5.9 and get you a sense of the different aspects of the platform, and then obviously to have a discussion around that towards the end. As far as 5.9 goes, the company has been around for about 7 years or so with a singular focus of helping customers, specifically system administrators, simplify, optimize, and secure their Microsoft cloud environment. Last year, we added support for Azure, and so we truly became a hybrid cloud platform that allows for customers to secure and manage their cloud infrastructure, specifically HyperV and Azure, of course. We're looking to satisfy customers, system administrators, security administrators that are struggling with using a variety of end products, specifically different interfaces that are trying to accomplish a variety of operational tasks. And that's really where 5.9 comes in, is it provides tremendous operational efficiency and subsequently cost efficiency as well. The footprint of 5.9 is pretty extensive because we've been around for 7 years. We have a very big global footprint, a lot of customers using the platform, over 5 million VMs that are being secured or managed in production with 5.9. And that spans a variety of verticals, different industries, all of course trying to gain these efficiencies within their cloud infrastructure environment. And so our technology is deployed within financial services, oil and gas, government, I mean, you name it, 5.9 is sitting within the data center. And then, of course, different class of customers, SMB, mid-market, larger enterprises, that have different data centers at different geographical locations, globally dispersed. And then, of course, service providers that are looking for different technologies to help them serve their customer base. Due to the history of 5.9, we have a very deep relationship with Microsoft. We work very closely with their engineering group, their program management groups, and then of course we have a variety of competencies with Microsoft around Gold Data Center and Silver Cloud Platform as well. As far as the platform, this is the best way to take a look at the platform from a holistic level. When you think about the 5.9 platform, as I mentioned, it covers a variety of different capabilities. The ability to get from private to public or public to public from a migration perspective, that's a product of ours called Cloud Migration. That capability is also built into the Cloud Manager product. The flagship product is the Cloud Manager product, which we will be showing today, and that has a variety of these capabilities inherently built in and included with your purchase of 5.9 Cloud Manager. That consists of management across your virtual infrastructure, replication for both on-prem and Azure, real-time monitoring and alerting capabilities built in, the ability to optimize your VMs across different hosts, clusters, etc. Backup and disaster recovery is also something that's actually built into the platform. And then, of course, administration, which is our core topic today, focused around providing granular role-based access control, multi-tenant support for MSPs, etc. And all of that's within 5.9 Manager, Cloud Manager. The cloud security product on the far right here is a separate capability that consists of different features you see listed above, like agentless antivirus, virtual firewall, IDS. All of those capabilities are also optimized to help secure your virtual infrastructure, whether it be private cloud, public cloud, or of course hybrid cloud. Pretty soon, next quarter, we'll be adding Azure Stack support, and so that'll give us comprehensive coverage on the Microsoft cloud, both current and of course future, as it relates to Azure Stack support. Administration, let's talk a little bit about this, and then we'll quickly move over to the demo itself and walk you through these capabilities. When you're thinking about the need for role-based access control, the picture on the right probably gives you a good sense of the kind of roles a super administrator might be looking to set up. Different roles for different types of employees that you might have within your infrastructure organization. So if you're have a help desk employee, limited capabilities, starting and stopping VMs only. Somebody that may be in an audit function, read access only, and then of course a senior administrator with full responsibility, you would want to provide them full access. And that's really where the 5.9 administration module is probably the best in the industry as it relates to providing this level of granularity, assigning specific functions for your team, and being able to have those be defined in a very clear and precise manner. And so that's what we're going to walk you through today as well. From a service provider perspective, if you're running in a multi-tenant environment and you're looking to serve a variety of those customers, or even if you're a large enterprise and you have multiple sites, once again, the administration module is a huge net gain for a lot of our customers, because they're able to give team members the access they need to view and do other things within their virtual resources. And once again, it can get pretty granular, and it allows for the company, whether it's an enterprise or a service provider, to be able to satisfy the roles within the organization without providing too much permission or not enough permission, as it might be with some other products in the industry. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rob, and Rob's going to give you guys a demo of how this actually works within the product. As Rob sets up, I'm just going to quickly mention that the 5.9 Cloud Manager product that Rob's going to walk you through is available for a free trial download on the website. So as you're listening, or as you become more and more interested because you see a fit within your environment, feel free to go to the 5.9 website and just download the 14-day trial to start to get used to the features. And then, of course, contact 5.9 if you have any questions. So, Rob, over to you.
Thanks, Vince. And thanks, everyone, for joining me today. So, yeah, on top of that, you can download the software. We also have a virtual lab, and the virtual lab's located in the resources section. So this also gives you a chance to run the software in a virtual stateless environment. Obviously, the best way to try the software out is locally in your own environment, but if that's not available, you can always try it out on our website in the resources section. So yeah, we're going to go over role-based access. Providing role-based access to HyperV hosts has always been a challenge for most organizations. A lot of that is based around the different domain structures potentially, or just a different type of users and the access they require. But before we dig into that too much, I just wanted to go and have you take a look at the actual architecture for our management platform. It's a very simple design, and that's what a lot of people really like about it, is we deploy a management server. That's what you see in the center here. But first I want to point out on the left is the console. So this is the console that the end users are going to run on their desktops. And they're going to use this console to gain access to the various resources. And this example would be the HyperV hosts. And the way that works is the console sends a request down to the management server. The management server itself is just a VM in your environment, or it could be a dedicated piece of hardware. In some cases, I've seen clients even run this on something like Azure, a virtual machine in Azure. But at the end of the day, the console needs to be able to connect to this management server. And it connects over this one particular port. And this port can be changed, obviously. So you're going to distribute this client to your end users. They'll authenticate to the cloud management server. And the management server will take those requests and distribute them out to the corresponding hosts. Or Azure, if you are also using Azure. The Five9 Cloud Management Server also requires a SQL database, MS SQL. By default, we deploy with SQL Express. That works in most deployments. Obviously, if you have a few hundred VMs, you're probably going to want to put this on a production SQL. Or if you already have production SQL in your environment, you can obviously connect to that already. So that's the actual architecture. Now we'll dig into the actual software here real quick. 1 second. Oops, wrong screen. There we go. All right, so what we're looking at here is one of my demonstration desktops. This is the login prompt that you received. So this is the actual software right here. This is the console. I already installed it on this computer. And the way it works is that they can log in either with, or you can log in with either your domain Windows user account, the current user, which I'm logged in under my domain account right now, or I can log in as a custom user, a user that's not associated to any domain. In this case, I'm just going to log in as my current domain account. So here I logged in. I can see my username down here, status, and what I'm looking at here is the environment that I have access to. So in this case, I have access to a cluster and 3 Hyper-V hosts within that cluster. These are the virtual machines within that cluster. If you're new to Five9 Cloud Manager, I'll just kind of quickly just express what we're looking at here. This is the management pane. So on this pane, you can perform all your different management functions. This is Azure. So here you can access your Azure workloads and replicate. So we have monitoring. We can report on all this infrastructure. We include backup, software-defined networking management, and the administration. So this is where we'll spend most of our time today, is in the administration area. But I'll show you how role-based access works with a lot of these different modules you see here. So the first thing you'll notice is all the functions on the page here. When I right-click, I can obviously do all these different functions to my virtual machines. So the way role-based access works for us is that every action that you see on this panel can be disabled or turned off depending on the user that's logged in. We can also determine what that user is able to see in this list of infrastructure. And so I'm going to show you some examples today about how we do this. So the first example I'm going to do is just a very simple example. I'm going to create a user, and I'm going to give him access to, let's say, this node DC. I'm going to give him very basic access, just allow him to connect to the console, stop and start the virtual machine. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and one of the reasons why the software is so popular with MSPs, along with some enterprises that have that distribution of data centers, is that the console can be run from any location. So you can connect to the infrastructure if, for example, using co-location or remote data centers. You do not require a VPN to access that infrastructure. So in the case of an MSP, they might have various different locations here, maybe Hyper-V hosts on-premise at different sites, client sites. So the software does deal with that. So if you do have all these different sites and servers, you want to create a single user that can manage all this different infrastructure. If you tried to do that with Active Directory, you would require some type of federation or all those domains to be linked together, or some kind of complex permissions in order to access all this different infrastructure. And that's kind of where we come in. So back to giving access to node 2 DC. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the administration section. In administration, we have global administrators, we have tenants, and then we have users. In this example, I'm just going to create a simple user. But before I do that, I have to put that user in a role. So up here we have users, tenants, and roles. I'm going to go to the role section. I'm going to create a role here. So we'll just call this support team. So we'll create a role here for support team. And what you're seeing here are the role-based access. So every item here is what that user can do or perform if I give him access to any of this type of infrastructure. So in this case, I'm not going to give him access to the host, the clusters, the virtual switches. So we're just going to give them access to one virtual machine. And on that virtual machine, I want them to be able to read it, connect to the console, start, and reset. That's it. Now I'm shut down. Push finish. So now I created a role called support team. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a user. I'm going to assign him into that role. So we're going to start off with a very basic example of just a single user. I'm going to create a custom user. So a custom user is a user that exists in our own authentication. So you have the ability to either use Active Directory users or custom users. Obviously, there's benefits for both of these. The custom user benefits, what I'm using now, benefits being is that you can give someone access to your infrastructure. And this, we'll give create user Joe. So the benefit about this is Joe's going to be able to log in with just the username Joe and have all different types of access to infrastructure, but at no time did you have to disclose your domain credentials or even create a user for this person in your Active Directory. So outside of our application, he has no rights within your network. It's only within this custom user account. So here I'll go ahead and create Joe, give him password test. So the next thing I can do is I have the resources and roles section. So what this is saying here is that I'm listed all the roles that I've created in the past. My support team is right there. That's the one I just created. So if I check this right now, what this means is that this user, Joe, that I'm creating now, is going to have full access to every item in my environment, but they'll be limited based on this role. But in this case, we want to give him access just to that one DC, so this doesn't work. We're going to go to use resource-based permissions. Now, up here I have different items that I can select. It's my clusters, my hosts, but we're just looking for one virtual machine, node 2 DC, located on node 2. So I would select that virtual machine, and I would select support team. Push next. And that assigns that role to that user that I just created, Joe. There he is down here. He's listed as a custom user. So what I'll do now is I'm actually going to log in as Joe. We can take a look at what the console looks like from this end user's perspective. So in this example, you would send Joe a copy of the console. It's a very simple exe program, installs on most any Windows desktop. So what we're doing right here is at this point, we're basically, the request is going down to the management server. The management server is authenticating that request and then determining what that person has rights to. Once it determines the rights, it caches some data, which is what it's doing right now, and then it presents that infrastructure. And there's my one VM. So I see just the one VM, and I can perform the functions I was given access to. I can shut down and reset. I can still connect to the console. So this user can obviously still manage this one virtual machine, but in a very limited function. And this is a true console connection also. But you'll notice that this user also has access to some other areas. So since we have this one virtual machine here, this user can still monitor this virtual machine. So in this case, they'll be able to see the performance of that virtual machine. They'll be able to track different metrics, for example, like the CPU and the network. It's also going to send out any alerts for this VM too. So here we're just looking at the general performance of that VM. I can drill into different areas like the CPU or the memory or the network, for example, up here, up top. So as you click through these, you'll be able to go through the different sections of that virtual machine. But the point of this is being that you're giving this one user access. You can keep an eye on this virtual machine. You can go back to historical times. And they also have alerts. So this user, since he has access to that one virtual machine, they can also configure their own alerts for that virtual machine. So if they want to receive notifications when that machine actually backs up, they don't have rights to backup, but they'll receive an email every time a backup is created. Or if it's replicating, they'll receive alerts for that. You can enable Windows event alerts. So if any of these Windows events fire, it will create an alert action. And then obviously we have metric alerts. So you can also get alerts for if the machine runs over a certain CPU or below a certain CPU. VM alerts. So you receive alerts for that VM. So this is the one that's most applicable to this situation. So the person could actually receive alerts there. And then at the data center layer, when they come into the monitoring, they'll just get an overview of all the VMs that they have access to. I did not give them rights to data stores because they can't create virtual machines. And then any alerts. So this one actually, the disk latency is a little too high on the node DC, so an alert was created. They can view backups if you are doing backups for that virtual machine, but they can't obviously create them. The method to create is listed here, but they won't have the ability to do it. And this is where they would see any backups running for that virtual machine. And they have access to reporting in some other areas. But let's take a look at some other user account creation types here. So if we go back to my global admin here. All right, so the next thing you might want to do is you might want to create a junior admin. And that junior admin, you might want to give other elevated rights. So in this area, I'll go ahead and add a user. But in this case, I'm going to add an Active Directory user. So I'll just click here and I can, don't know, actually, I'm going to add a custom user for this one. So for this one, we're going to add a custom user again. We'll just call it junior admin. Password test. I'm not going to assign any roles to him yet. Finish. All right. So in this case, I'm actually creating the user first. Which method you do, I probably should have created the role first, but you'll see how it works. So I'll go ahead and create a role here then. We'll call this junior admin. And what I'm going to give junior admin access to here, I'm going to give them access to read the cluster. I'm going to allow them to create virtual machines. I'll allow them to read the hosts and edit the virtual machine. So they'll be able to go to settings and maybe edit the amount of memory that's available to that virtual machines. Now at the storage, I need to give them access to storage. If they're going to create virtual machines, they need to be able to read the storage, and they need to be able to add to the storage. And the virtual machines, I'll give them access to most of the functions on the virtual machine level. So I'm just going to go through and click these real quick. Don't want them removing machines, probably a bad idea. We'll have them do everything else then. All right, and then at the virtual switch level, again, if we're going to give them access to create virtual machines, they need to be able to assign a virtual switch to it. So I'll give them rights to read the virtual switch. Oh, I already have a junior admin. Junior admin 2. There we go. So I created junior admin 2. I'm going to go back to my users. I'm going to find my junior admin user that I created. I'm going to go to edit. The reason I'm going to edit is because I created him already. So this is how you would assign an existing or a new role to an existing user. So I'm back here again, junior admin. I'm not going to specify what they have access to. So we're just going to use that complete role-based access here. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the junior admin 2 role. But this means I'm going to give him access over the entire environment. So when we go back and look at this user, let's log out of this one. And what you should see here is that this user now is going to be limited on that scope. They'll be able to create virtual machines. They'll be able to do some general functions. They won't be able to remove the virtual machines, but they'll be able to do it to all your environments. So as you add new hosts, they'll automatically be applied. And then after this, we're just going to go into one last administration, and that's where you're using groups. So when you're using groups, it's really important that you understand that if in Active Directory, you're going to have the ability to create groups. I can create a group called, let's say, development team. And I'm going to be able to assign users to that group in Active Directory, but use the RBAC built-in cloud manager to control that user's what they can do. But going back to this user, so this is the user that we created. It's a junior admin. They're limited on certain functions. So for example, they can't remove VMs or delete them. But they can still do functions like here. I can go to this HyperV host. I can right click, say create VM. And just kind of go through the create VM process. Obviously, when you create a virtual machine with our software, you can either create a brand new blank virtual machine, or you can create a VM from a template. And then you're presented with a list of templates. I select my template storage on demo node 3, and then I'm listed with what templates are available on that storage, and I can deploy a VM from that template. This is one thing that comes up a lot is, and this I hear more with the MSP side of things. They want to be able to specify what templates a user can actually use. And this is where we're going to isolate this user. I just wanted to run through one more scenario here where we're going to isolate a user down to his own area within the environment. And this is done this way. So if I go back to my administration area, there we go. First thing I'm going to do is go to HyperV Management. So if I want to give a user, so I'm going to create a group here. And we'll go back to that group scenario. So this is what I'm doing. I'm going to create a group for the developers. And I'm going to give developers full access, but I'm only going to give them full access to a particular host. And I'll show you how we do this. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and say create group. So I'm going to use an Active Directory group, a group that's already exists within my Active Directory. In this case, it's going to be HyperV administrators. I don't have a developers group. Low imagination. But basically what this is saying is that any user that I place in HyperV administrators will have whatever permission I set here on the environment, whether it's on an individual host, which is what I'm going to do for this user. I'm going to allow this team that I'm creating, this group, I'm going to give them full access to demo node 2. And so I'll give them access to the switching, and I'll give them access to the storage. But here's the thing. So these developers, I can have them, when they're creating their virtual machines, they can place them on my CSV volumes, but I really don't like that idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to finish this up now, and I'm going to go back and isolate them now. So what I'll do is I'll go up here to Data Store, And this allows you to specify where you store data. And here are my virtual machine storage locations. So you'll see that I just have a CSV volume here. This CSV volume is C Cluster Storage Volume 2. But what I'm going to do in C Cluster Storage Volume 2 is I'm going to go ahead and create a folder. I'm going to create a folder called Dev Team. Dev Team 2. It looks like I already have one. So this is the second Dev Team. So I created a folder called Dev Team 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a storage location for them. So I'm going to add data store. And we'll say dev store. It's part of the demo cluster. And the path is, and you'll see it browses the cluster storage and it's Dev Team 2. Select. Finish. Now I created a storage location, so when they create virtual machines, the only option that anyone in that group is going to see is the ability to create storage on that that Dev Team storage. So they'll be locked to that to that subfolder here. They're locked in that subfolder. So every time they create a VM, it will be here. So at least you have that part cleaned up. So if devs creating their own VMs, it's stored in this location. They can't store them anywhere else. So the next would be ISOs. You can do the same thing for your ISOs. You can create an area. This is what I wanted to point out before was templates. So a template, I'm using an SMB share, right? So the same idea here, I can go ahead and create a special template storage location for the Dev Team. Create Dev Team. And then I easily add that storage location. Template library, add data store. We'll say dev templates. And this is a network file share. It's available to all my VMs. Hopefully I spell it right. All right, so now I've created the storage location. So this is what we're going to do. I have the ability now, if I wanted to, because this lets you browse the storage locations. I could take some of these templates. Due to the time today, I won't be able to, but I can copy this and I can paste it down here into that Dev Team storage. So we'll go ahead and try it now. But what would eventually happen is that template would show up here. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to let it copy. So I'm going to go back to that custom group. So here it is, HyperV Administrators. So it's the group I created, but I wasn't done because of the storage. So I'm going back in again. And so for this group, if you remember, I gave them access to demo node 2. I'll give them access to the switching. On switching, they only need access to demo node 2, so I gave them a little too much access there. There you go. And this one. And then storage. So what I'm saying is that, okay, if they're going to create virtual machines on demo node 2, I want them to be able to create the virtual machines in template storage, dev templates. So I'll give them access to that. And for their virtual machine storage, I want them to store those in dev store. Then on the virtual machines, we'll just give them access to a few virtual machines. Oops, there we go. Okay. All right, so now if I log in as any user part of the HyperV administrators, I would be able to go back in and create a virtual machine. So I'll have full access. I'll only see demo node 1, for example, and I'll see the VMs on that node, or not see them depending on how you set it up. But when I do a create VM action now, and I actually create a virtual machine, it's going to give me these options once again. I have the option of either creating a blank virtual machine or creating a VM from template. But when that user comes here and selects data store, they'll only see dev templates because that's the only one that you've given them rights to. and in the template section, they would only see the templates that are actually located in that dev template section. In my case, the copy work. Or they can create a new virtual machine. So if they create a new virtual machine, on the next screen, they're given the option of where to place that virtual machine. And obviously, the only place that's going to become available to them is their dev store. They won't even see these other storage locations. They'll just see dev store. And so this way, you can control where the users are creating the virtual machine. So it's really flexible in terms of the way that you're going to divvy out that administration. And when you're using groups like this, you don't have to worry about coming back in the Cloud Manager in order to give out administration. So if you are using Active Directory and you want to continue using that to assign users access, you can create your groups in Active Directory, and then as you add those users to the groups, they'll automatically be associated with that group in our software and have the rights and the roles based on that group. So you don't have to come back into our software every time you add a user. You would just add them in Active Directory. In my case, I'll drag them into the HyperV administrators group, and then they instantly have access to this console. They would log in as that domain user, and they'll be limited based on the role that was assigned to this HyperV administrators group. So that's one way that we handle that. So this type of administration, where you're able to lock down and limit what they're able to see, all this is also available in one other area that I wanted to point out here. Let's go ahead and share my screen here real quick. So we also have an API. So this is a question that comes up a lot of times for MSPs and enterprises, is they have systems already in place that they want to use in order to create users. Let me go ahead and share my screen. One second. So this is the actual API. So our software comes with full access to the underlying API. So you can do things like, for example, list all the hosts in your environment. So if I execute this, it's going to return me all the hosts in my environment, some details about it. But this also has all the pieces of administration and the roles. So down here, I can list all my roles. I can actually add new roles. I can assign roles to users. I can create tenants, and also I can create users through the API. So this is the call that you would use to list all the users in your environment. Here's all my users and their rights. And then you would call, obviously, the post here to add a new user. So you would apply this information and post that new user. So automation is a big part of most larger environments today. And using the API, you'll be able to very easily create those users' roles, assign them to a tenant, either assign them to different virtual machines very easily using your current systems that you might have in place today. So I just wanted to go over that real quick. Let me jump back here again. Oops, wrong screen again. Keep wanting to go back to that one for some reason. There we go. So we're back here again. So what I'll do is I'm going to run through just some other areas of the software real quick, so you can take a look at it. And so these areas that I'm showing you are also available to anyone else that logs into. So here's the Azure Management piece. So Azure Management is going to allows you to add Azure subscriptions and then shows the actual virtual machines that are running in Azure. You can also replicate these virtual machines to Azure. This is something that's available to end users. So when someone has access to this panel, they do have access to these features. Monitoring. So as we saw earlier, obviously you have access to monitoring. When you're logged in as a global admin, you can keep an eye on all the different shares. So I can see how much of my dev template storage the dev team is actually currently utilizing. Kind of keep an eye on them, for example. Here's my client VM storage. These are all the different storage locations. Down here are any alerts that are coming up for the environment. And obviously you can drill into that. So if you did create a user and you gave them access to a cluster, they could drill into the cluster, monitor all the items of that cluster, whether it's the virtual machines, the cluster disks, and see the overall health of that environment. Here's the disks. You can even drill in and check out the real-time data going through those clustered volumes. So let's say you had a cluster admin. You can give them access to all the clusters, so they can come in here and take a look at the different aspects of the cluster disks, the cluster health over periods of time. So users are also going to have access to reporting features. So reporting is going to use machine learning to figure out exactly some of these different areas up here, whether it's CPU, memory usage, disk usage. And up here you set the period. So in this case, this user has access to all this infrastructure. So it's using all this infrastructure part of its analytics in the past month, or maybe I specify a custom time frame. And the purpose of this is to allow you to get a quick glance of how you're utilizing your infrastructure, and also allow you to right-size some of your equipment. So in the case of someone just having access to one Hyper-V host, they would still get this report, but it would only be only represent data from the machines within that one host. But in this case, it's everything. And so what we're looking at here, CPUs for the past 30 days in the past month. And it's telling me that the guest CPU of this 5.9 machine on average in the past 30 days has ran at 12% CPU utilization, where everything else in my environment somewhere around here. So over here, I'm looking at the low CPU users. So the idea of this report is maybe if this was considered too high for you, you might come over here and take this VM, who obviously doesn't need the 4 CPU cores that I gave it. I'll take 2 CPU cores from this one and give it to this one. By doing that, this CPU's utilization should go up a little bit. This one should come down a little bit. So that same scenario is what you're going to use across this entire report. Over here, you have the VMs or the infrastructure you have rights to. It's showing you how quick the disks are spinning. Top disk user down to lowest disk user. Memory utilization. So this is important. It's basically showing you how much memory you have assigned to these VMs and how much memory they've demanded over the past 30 days. So here, for example, if we take a look at some of these, I have this 5.9 service VM. I've assigned it 8 gigs, but it only really demands 6 gigs. So it's probably a little bit oversized, but I might have some others that can use it, like this Guac server here, for example. On average, I only assigned it 4 gigs, but it looks like it demands 5 gigs. Looks like I need to add more memory. So that same scenario as you saw up here at the CPU, finding places where you can take memory and add memory to better right-size the equipment. So when we break those down in static, dynamic. This is going to show you how many VMs you're adding. So if you have the create VM rights and you're creating VMs in the environment, you can then keep track of how many VMs you're adding each month. These are any disks that you may have left behind. So again, if you're creating virtual machines and you have access to the storage, it's going to keep track if you left any disks behind that aren't attached to the hypervisor. And if you're a cluster admin, you have access to the cluster. We have the CSV volume growth. So this is showing me that last December, we were at somewhere around 207 gigs. We're slowly increasing in size. Which kind of makes sense because if we look at the number of VMs we're increasing by, they actually kind of match. So this is a good thing. This is kind of what you want to see. You don't want to see big deviations where you have a massive spike in disk usage, but you're not adding more VMs. That tells you that one of your VMs is growing potentially out of control. So this is healthy in my opinion. That's the way it should look. Some of the other reports I'll just kind of skim through. We have the zombie VM report. It lists the VMs based on, it ranks them. So to lower the ranking, the more chance that this VM is stuck or in a reboot cycle. Number 2 is a pretty high ranking in terms of a zombie VM. If it's a 0, 1, or 2, great chance that it's a zombie VM. So I click on it, it shows me what's going on, and in case it is what we refer to as a zombie VM, it's a VM stuck on a boot screen. So you can go in there, potentially delete this VM or fix it. And it's able to determine that based off of these 3 network usage. So once again, if I have access to just one Hyper-V host, I will have access still to these reports. All these reports, the zombie VM, the VM lifecycle management, and the system status report, which is an audit of or an environmental check. So it's basically it's all this infrastructure that you see here is going to be listed out in a single pane. So all these reports can be generated by the user. So the user running the software can create a schedule. So once a month, they're actually going to receive their VM lifecycle report, or they'll receive a zombie VM report about the infrastructure they have access to. All this can be scheduled, obviously, and it's based on the end user who's logged in, what reports they want to see, what monitoring data or alerts they want to receive. It's all based on the end user. This report takes a little while to generate, because what it's doing is literally counting every single item on every single cluster and Hyper-V host within this environment. The way I see this report used, it's an inventory, basically, or an audit. And the way I see this report being used is organizations are running this report on a schedule once a month, maybe once a week, and storing this report somewhere in their environment. So if they ever needed to go back in time, they could very easily pull up this report and see where their environment was in that snapshot. So in that particular point in time, they had these switches. These were all the hosts, and those hosts had these disks. And these are the VMs that are running on it. So it's a complete report of the environment and the inventory of everything that was in that environment when the report was taken. It's quite exhaustive. There's a lot of data on this report. So yeah, and then the other stuff is backups. So you can give a user access to do their own backups. And you would specify the storage for where they would store that backup. So you can give a user access. Let's say that a user only has access to one VM. So when they log in, the only VM they see is new VM. They would have the ability, if you granted, to create a backup of that VM. And when they create the backups can either be stored locally in a location that you specified they have access to, or it can be stored in Azure. That end user could actually type in their Azure credentials, and that VM can go out to Azure. You as an administrator, you can create a backup schedule, for example, that would back up the entire environment. And we'll kind of take a look at that here. I'll just kind of run through a quick backup. So we're creating backups. You can even disable VSS for your backups. You can encrypt and compress the backups. So both end users and administrators can have access to this. I can back up all the infrastructure. If I was just a lower end user, I might only see this one VM and it would automatically be selected because that's the only VM that is in my environment. I won't even see this other infrastructure. I can go to demo cluster and I will select my backup storage location. This is where I can make a copy to Azure. So I'll put my Azure blob storage details and this data would go right out of Azure. I can do daily, weekly, monthly backups or just manual backups. Full backups and incremental backups. So obviously incremental backups, I can specify how many times I want to do incremental before we start a full backup. And then where to store these backups and how long to store them on the disks. So my suggestion is if you're going to give end users access to backup, create a storage location for them so you can monitor that storage location. And this way that user can also restore his backups. So that user comes in here and he goes to archives, they'll see all the backups that were ran for that infrastructure that they have access. And they come in, they can hit restore. And this gives them the action to either restore the entire virtual machine back to the original location or a new location if they have access. Or you can browse and actually install or browse and pull off the virtual machine files. So in short, a user calls you up and says, I lost a Word document. Can you please pull it out of my VM from a week ago? You can actually go into that VM from a week ago, and pull individual files out of the virtual machines. And so that's the backup. Again, that is a user or administration level access. It's a role-based access. Software-defined networking, this is only an administration feature. Users do not have access to it. It's not a role-based access. Rightfully so, because this is the complete administration area for SDN. So if you are doing software-defined networking, we attach to your existing network controllers. If you don't have network controllers yet, you can use a software to deploy. And the last piece I wanted to go over in administration, obviously, is keeping an eye on everything. So this is the jobs view. This is a list of what every user has done in this environment since the day that we've actually deployed Five9 Cloud Manager. And what I'm able to do is I'm able to go ahead and take a look. I'm the only one that's logged in today and actually hasn't done anything. But in some cases, you can see other users here. And I can watch what they're doing. I can see what server they actually worked on. You can pull in and see that this one, they actually installed an agent on this. And this one, we actually added a data. So all this data can come out syslog. So in some cases, administrators will take all this data and send it out to some sort of SIN system or like Splunk or Microsoft OMS and store this data for compliance or regulatory reasons. Or they might just put this up on a screen in front of them and they'll watch during the day what all the users are doing in their environment, trying to keep an eye on things. And we go a bit further. We also show what was done during that command. So we show who did it, what it was done to, but we also show the command that was executed. So it's a full, complete audit. So that kind of wraps up administration. I showed you how you can create users. You can assign those users roles and limit the scope of access they might have, and how you can create groups and use those groups in order to continue to use Active Directory and continue to add users to Active Directory and use that as your main way of segregating permissions. So yeah, at this point, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Vince so we can go ahead and see if we have any questions.
Okay, great, Rob. Thanks. That was a great overview. I see two questions here that we'll quickly walk through and wrap up the webinar. The first one is, I see that you showed Hyper-V. Is there RBAC for Azure? You want to...
RBAC for Azure. Today, today you would have to handle that through the Azure portal, but we do have a release coming out, should be out mid-April, that is going to include RBAC for Azure. So in that case, let's say you're an MSP, I'll use that as an example. You might have a single subscription and you want to put all your users in that one single subscription. But you want to limit what those users can see or which virtual machines they have access. That's the level of RBAC we're going to add. So you can very easily give someone access to just one virtual machine in your Azure subscription.
Okay, great. Are there any limitations with my license for using administration? So I guess maybe they're asking, like if I buy 100 VMs, am I limited in any way as it relates to administration?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our software is not based on users, consoles, or console deployments. So to use Vince's example, if you did purchase a 100 VM license, for example, you could effectively distribute the console out to 1,000 different users. There's no licensing mechanism built into that. It's only based on the number of VMs or the number of hosts that you're running in your environment.
Okay, great. I think that is all I see for questions. Once again, as we discussed at the beginning, you're welcome to go to the Five9 webpage, go to the Cloud Manager link, and there's a free trial option for a 14-day trial where you'll get full access to all the functionality within Cloud Manager that Rob walked through, and it'll get you guys familiar with the product, and obviously we'll be able to answer any questions for you during that process. And then, as Rob mentioned, there's also the VLabs option, which allows for you to experiment with the software without having to download it, and that's under resources of the Five9 website. So with that, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to talking to you next time on our 5.9 Demo Friday. Thanks again.
Thanks.